Hi everyone, it's Hannah from Hand Gem Crochet, and today we are making my Franny Granny square sweater together. It's a really fun design to make, and we have lots of different options for styling in it, in sizes all the way from adult extra small to 5XL. So I'll put in the description the link for where you can find it on my blog, or where you can get the PDF pattern if you would like to have one to keep and print out. To make the sweater, you are going to need a 4.5mm G+ crochet hook, or the hook that matches the gauge for you. Then you'll also need a pair of scissors, a needle for your ends, and a couple of stitch markers too. And then in terms of yarn, you'll see from the images I've made a couple of different versions. I did one with this amazing jewel spun yarn from Sirdar, which is an Aran weight yarn, but actually matches really nicely with their bonus DK yarn. So these are the colours that I used, and I'll pop a picture across the screen here now. So the granny squares at the top, and the sleeves and the collar and the cuff are in this bonus DK, and then the body of the sweater is in this jewel spun Aran. And then the plain version that you see in the blue is in a paint box, simply DK yarn, which is another lovely category 3 weight yarn. So all the information for the amount of yarn you'll need for each version is in the description below and within the pattern also. To begin making our sweater, we need to make some of these full granny squares and half granny squares, and then piece them together to create this yoke, which is the same at the front and the back. Now there are two different options in the pattern. You can make a round neck, or you can make a V-neck. And the only difference is that we do 2 less of these half granny squares for the V-neck than we do for the round neck. So for both the V and the round neck, we are going to make 10 full granny squares. And then for the round neck, we need to make 4 half granny squares. And for the V-neck, you only need to make 2, because we won't put these here at the front and the back. To make our full granny squares, we are going to begin with a magic ring. And you can do that however you prefer to do that. I know lots of people do it differently. And then we're going to chain 1. And then you're going to work 3 double crochet into that magic ring. We're going to chain 2. And then I'm going to pull it slightly closed because I don't quite need it that big. And then another 3 double crochet. We chain 2, another 3 double crochet, chain 2, then 3 double crochet, which makes the 4th side. Then we chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch in this first one to join. Now we pull tight, and there we have round 1. To begin our next round, we are going to slip stitch through to this chain 2 space that we have here. And then we are going to begin with a stacked double crochet. Now I really love working stacked double crochets. All we need to do is do a single crochet, and then into the side of that single crochet just here, we're going to work another single crochet, and that gives us the height of a double crochet, and it means that we don't have to do any chains, we don't have to do any extra bits and pieces here that make it look slightly wonky. And then what we do is carry on. We're going to work another 2 double crochet. So that's our first double crochet we did there, second double crochet, and our third double crochet, because we need sets of 3. Then we're going to chain 2, and then in that same place we are going to work another 3 double crochet. So that creates a corner for us. And then we chain 1, and then we skip these three stitches we have here, and then in this chain 2 space at the corner we are going to work 1, 2 and 3, then we chain 2 and then another 3 double crochet into that same corner space there. Then we chain 1, and then we're going to do the same thing again in this corner. We're going to work 3 double crochet, a chain 2, and then 3 double crochet. And you might have guessed what we're doing for the last one. We will chain 1, skip these 3, and then work again into that corner space. Chain 2. My yarn is desperately trying to get nearer me. Then we chain 1, and then we skip these 3 and then slip stitch into that first to join. Now if you are changing colour at any point, then you change it at the end of the round there, you break your yarn, and then what you're going to do is join into this chain 2 space here. But what we're going to do is carry on in the same colour and slip stitch through, and we will do round 3. And round 3 for me is the last round I need to do because I'm doing a medium size, but for other sizes you'll see that they do carry on, and both the next sets of sizes all have a round 4, that just makes your square slightly bigger. So we're going to begin here with another stacked double crochet, and then 2 double crochet. So your corners will remain exactly the same, it's just the middle section now that changes. We chain 2 to make the corner, we then put 3 double crochet into that same space again. Chain 1, and then we skip these 3, and then into this chain 1 space we're going to work 3 double crochet. We chain 1, skip these 3, and then off we go, and let's make another corner here. And then we do what we just did here. We chain 1, we work into this chain 1 space, 3 double crochet into there, and you'll see that we just carry on all the way around. We chain 1, we skip these 3, we're going to work a corner here, 3 double crochet into here, corner, 3 double crochet, then we chain 1 and we slip stitch to join in here. So that's all there is to it, because even if you're carrying on with bigger sizes, you're actually going to be doing a very, very similar thing. So go ahead and make all of your full granny squares, and then come back here to find me and we'll do the half granny squares together. To make our half granny squares, we are again going to begin with a magic ring, and then we're going to chain 1, and then into that magic ring we work 3 double crochet. So it starts very similarly to the full granny square. So 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to work another 3 double crochet into there. So we have 1, 2, and 3. And then for the half granny square, what we need to now do is turn, because that's all we need for the very center of it. We're going to turn our work, and then into this very first stitch we are going to work a stacked double crochet, and then 2 more double crochet stitches. So that's our first cluster of 3 double crochet there. Then we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and then into this chain 2 space we'll make a corner just like we did in the full granny squares. So that is 1, 2 and 3 double crochet stitches, then chain 2, and then into the same place 3 more double crochet. Then we chain 1, we skip the next 2, and then into the very last stitch we're going to work 3 double crochet. And then we're ready to turn and work row 3, which is the last round for the medium size we're making. And we stack a double crochet in there. And just like we did before, we're then going to work 2 double crochet into that same stitch. Chain 1, and then we skip and go into this chain 1 space we have here. We have 3 double crochet to go in there. Chain 1, skip these 3, and then work our corner here. Chain 2, and then 3 more into that same space. We chain 1, skip the next 3, and then into that chain 1 space we work 3 double crochet. We chain 1, we skip the next 2, and then 3 double crochet into that very last stitch. And that for the medium, or extra small, small and medium, that's all we need to do. But for the remaining sizes you will need to do a little more. So if you want to go and make your half granny squares now, and do make sure you check in the pattern for how many you need to do of those, because there are different amounts, and then meet me back here and I will show you how to join them all together and make our yoke. Right, so once you have made all of your squares and your triangles, we are ready to join them together to make the yoke of the sweater, or the start of the yoke of the sweater. And here you have a couple of options. It's all detailed within the written pattern, but you can make a full v-neck. So this is the layout that you would have here. You can't quite see, but there's a diagram in the pattern, and there's a square here down at the front and a square here at the back. And this would then give you a V either side, or you could have a rounded at the back with just a V at the front by adding in a triangle just here, or you could have, as I'm going to have here, a triangle here at the front as well to make it much more of a rounded neckline. So whichever way you want to go, absolutely fine. It won't make any difference to the yoke and the bottom of the sweater. It will just make a difference to your neckline. So you can always add one afterwards once you've done the yoke and you try it on. If depending on where you want it to sit on you, you can definitely add one in afterwards. And the way that we now join these, my recommendation is that we use a flat slip stitch seam. But if you would like to sew them together, then absolutely go for it. If you want to do a different seaming method, do whatever fits and works for you best. The only thing I would say is make sure that it doesn't add any width, because this is obviously now the size that we need it to be for the beginning of the yoke. So just take care not to add anything. So maybe not do like a zigzag or anything, or add chains in between. So I will show you here on 2 of these squares how we join with this seam, and then you can go ahead and join all of these seams. Now the triangles have 1 less stitch, so you just need to make sure you pull up and double up on that last stitch there for them, but just join all of the seams, and they all need to be done individually, and then you'll need to weave in the ends. So here we are with 2 of our squares, and for this seam we are going to match the stitches up, and I'm going to start by putting into the back loop of that chain, the very last chain before we begin the 3 double crochet stitches, and then I'm going to find the same corresponding chain here on this one, and then with the yarn underneath your work, so the long tail here and the short tail here at this side, I am going to yarn over and pull through. And then I'm going to find the back loop of the next stitch and then the next stitch on the other square. Yarn over and we pull through. And that is all there is to it. We just carry on all the way along, making sure that you keep your tension nice and loose, because you don't want to pull this too tight because it will change the shape and size of your squares. So that's how the seam will look, and then break your yarn and then repeat that around to join the whole of the yoke together, and then we will be ready to start the rest of the yoke. Okay, so now we have joined the yoke all together. We have this shape that will become folded over and like this, but for a little while longer we are going to be working in rounds, turned rounds now, around the entire circumference of this. To begin round one now then, we need to find one of the chain 2 spaces either at the front or the back of the sweater, and you are going to join your yarn here, and in this chain 2 space we're going to chain 1 and then we're going to work a stacked double crochet and then another 2 double crochet in that same chain 2 space, and that becomes our first granny cluster. So any set of 3 double crochets is now a granny cluster. We're going to chain 2 and then we're going to work another 3 double crochets, so the next granny cluster in that same chain 2 space. And so this sets what we're going to do at the front and the back of the sweater to increase now, to keep that point going. We're going to be working 1 granny cluster, a chain 2 and then another granny cluster. And now if you refer to the written pattern wherever you're using it from, you'll see that we now need to distribute evenly some granny clusters along the side of here until we get to the other chain 2 space. Now this will be a different number depending on which size you are making. Because of course different sizes have different size granny squares, you'll have different size spaces, and we will need a different number to make the yoke bigger or smaller. So for the size that I'm making, the medium, I need to work on the sides of each of these areas. I need to work 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then the final one gets 2. So that's how we need to distribute for this size, but it is different for different sizes, so make sure you watch out for that. And so what you'll find is that they don't necessarily need to go in these chain 1 spaces. You may need to put them into a stitch in order to distribute them evenly. So, but for this one, I'm actually going to work 3 in here. So I'm going to work into that chain 1 space to begin with. And my best piece of advice with this round is just don't overthink it. Don't overthink it too much. You'll be absolutely fine. And then the second set, I'm going to work into that chain 1 space. And then I chain 1 and then into that last chain 1 there. And now, oh, she says, there we go. And now on the next one, we also need to do 3, but if I work into this one or this one and this one, then that leaves too big a gap for the next. So what I'm actually going to do here is work into the first stitch of this set. I chain 1 and then into the second stitch of the second set. And then I think probably into the last stitch of that set. But just have a go and see where it sits comfortably for you. And so I continue doing that, working 3 sets, 3 clusters along the sides of each of these up until we get to this last one. And so meet me back here and we'll do this one together and then increase at the back. So here I am at this last square, and I'm going to work into that center stitch of this one. Chain one, and then I'm going to go into the chain one space, I think, because then we chain one and we've arrived at this chain two space, and we are going to work, as I said before, our 3 double crochet as our first granny cluster, and then a chain 2 and then 3 double crochet. Then we chain 1, then we're ready to repeat what we did on this side. So everything gets 3 apart from this last one that gets 2. So work along this side, and then we'll be ready to slip stitch to join in this first stitch. Now here we are at the end of that round, and I'm going to slip stitch to join, she says. There we go. And then we are going to slip stitch through to the chain 2 space, and then we're ready to turn to begin our next round. Now the next round is basically exactly the same. We just don't need to choose where to put our clusters because we already have the chain 1 spaces for them. So we're going to begin our increase here with a stacked double crochet, and then another 2 double crochet, then we chain 2, and then pop another 3 double crochet in there. Then we're going to chain 1, then we're ready for a plain sailing round of 3 double crochet in each of the chain 1 spaces around, followed by a chain 1, and then we go into the next chain 1 space with the 3 double crochet. And that's what we do up until we get to this chain 2 space here. We get 2 chain 2 spaces per round, and in that we're going to do our increase again. So you're going to do 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet in here, and then you'll carry on this side and all the way back to the beginning of the round, and then we just carry on as we have done there. We then slip stitch into that chain 2 space, we turn our work, and off we go again. So just carry on for the amount of rounds that it tells you in the pattern. For the size I'm making, I need 12 completed rounds like this, and then once you have completed the amount of rounds for your size, we can get back together again and I will show you how to split for the sleeves. So I have completed all of the rounds for the size medium that I'm making for the yoke, and you see it's a very odd shape, but I promise this will work. We have a point at the front and at the back, and I've still got my working yarn attached and ready in that chains 2 space to do our next section when we split for the sleeves. And I've already gone ahead and put my stitch markers in one side so that I can show you, but this is the point where we need to pop stitch markers in so that we know where to split for the sleeves. If you've never done a top-down raglan before, or raglan style before, this is how simple it absolutely is. We just need to pop our stitch markers in place and then create holes for the sleeves to go. So for the size I'm making, the pattern tells me to skip the first 11 chain 1 spaces. Let me check that. Yes, I have told you right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then put a stitch marker in the next one. And then we're going to make sure that they're equal from this side. So you can either count again back from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and then put in the next one. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 left for the sleeve hole. Now the written pattern has all of these numbers in it, but the PDF version does also include diagrams for each of the yokes, because obviously all the different sizes will have a different number that you need to skip here, here, and here to get everything to be the right size. And one thing of note is that if you are making or have made one of my versions without the squares at the top, these numbers are different, so don't expect them to be the same if you're, as I know lots of people are, working through the series of them. So don't worry, stick with the pattern, do as it says, and you'll be great. So once you've got your stitch markers in place, we are ready to split for the sleeves, and we continue at the moment to work in rounds because we're not going to flatten the bottom and close the sides yet unless you want to. So there's lots of detail in the pattern about how to shorten and how to lengthen. We're basically going to just keep increasing at the front and the back in order to keep making the sweater longer at this point. The way that we begin this round is the same as we have done all the others. We're in that chain 2 space and I have already turned, and now I'm working a stacked double crochet with another 2 double crochet to make a granny cluster. Then we're chaining 2 and then working another granny cluster into that chain 2 space, so another 3 double crochet. And then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work into the chain 1 space, a granny cluster into there, and then we're going to chain 1. Now we need to continue as we have been, working granny clusters separated by chain 1 space up until we get to the chain 1 space before the stitch marker. So off you go up until that point, and then I'll show you how we split for the sleeves. Now here we are at the first stitch marker, and we are going to put a granny cluster in here, so 3 double crochet. After doing that granny cluster, we now need to make a chain that we're then going to connect to the other chain 1 space that has a stitch marker in it to make the armhole. It's very hard to see. There we go. Now this chain is a different size for different sizes, so make sure that you check in the pattern how many you're going to need to do. But for the size I'm making, I need to do 8. And then we need to get ready to work a granny cluster, which is going to go into that chain 1 space that has got the next stitch marker in it. So this will leave lots of granny clusters and spaces open for the sleeve. And then we chain 1, and then the rest of the round is just as we know it for up until where we have our point, and then you're going to increase here as we have normally, and then the other side you're going to replicate what we've just done there. You're going to work until this stitch marker, then you're going to chain 8 or however many you need, and then you're going to join to this one and then get to your end of the round as we have before, and then slip stitch into this stitch. So if you go ahead and work that and then meet me back, and I'll show you what we do for the next round. So at the end of that round, I have slip stitched through, gosh that's hard to say, and I'm now in the chain 2 space ready to begin my next round. And we have our chains at the sides under the arms, and now we're going to work a round that then adds granny clusters to those so that we can then start to make the downward sides of the body. So yet again, we start in exactly the same way with our point here at the beginning. So a stacked double followed by 2 double crochet, a chain 2, and then 3 double crochet. And then we're going to chain 1 and then work our granny clusters as we have been into these chain 1 spaces. And we're going to carry on working that just up until we get to this last chain 1 space here. So work away for those, and then I'll show you what we do at this underarm chain here. Now here we are at that chain 8 space that I have, and so I've chained 1 and now I'm going to skip this granny cluster, and then I'm going to work another granny cluster into this first chain that we have here. The colour of this yarn now where we've got to makes it hard to see those chains, but I promise you there are 8 there. And then we are not going to chain 1 here. We are just going to skip 2 chains, and then over the next 2 chains here we're going to work double crochet 2 together. So there's the beginning, and there's the beginning of the next one, and we yarn over and pull through all 3. And then we don't chain 1, we are going to skip 2, and then in this last chain that we have here we are going to work another granny cluster. And then we chain 1, and now we're off. We're ready to work a granny cluster in each of these chain 1 spaces, and then work our point as we always have been. And then you're going to match this side on this side here with your, wherever it's gone, chain 8 space here. So we're going to add a granny cluster here, skip 2, work a double crochet 2 together, skip 2, and then a granny cluster. And the rest of the round is the same as we have been doing up until this point. So go ahead and do that, and then we have just one more round to show you how it extends and how it works, and then it's up to you how long you make it. So finish this round, we've got one more round to go, and then you'll be able to figure out how long you'd like yours. So at the end of that round I have gone ahead and slip stitched through to the chain 2 space, ready to go again. So this round is going to begin exactly the same as we did before. We're going to increase here and make our points. We are going to work a granny cluster in each of these, separated by chain 1 space, up until we get to this space here. So I've popped a stitch marker in there just to show you and to help me find it. So here is where we have our double crochet 2 together. We don't have a chain 1 space here, and so this chain 1 space we need to stop just before that chain 1 space there. So work up until here and then meet me back here, and I will show you what we do to start closing in this portion of the underarm. Now here I am, and I'm going to work a granny cluster into this chain 1 space before the double crochet 2 together. And the reason I wanted to stop just before there was to make sure that you know that we now don't do a chain 1 after this granny cluster. We're going to work to decrease here, so we're going to pull in this center here, and the way that we do that is that we skip this granny cluster and then we work a double crochet into that double crochet 2 together without any chain 1 space there. So we're not going to work into this anymore, and we're going to pull in underneath the arm here. And then we don't work a chain 1 space, we are going to skip this granny cluster and then work into that chain 1 space that we come across next. So then the rest of the round up until our point at the end here is the same. We have granny clusters into each chain 1 space, we increase here with a point, and then again we replicate what we've just done here on the other side. So if it helps to put a stitch marker in, then do. So you're going to be working up until, so this is our double crochet 2 together here, so we don't have a chain 1 space there, so we're going to work up until this one here, then work a granny cluster, don't chain 1, and then go straight into that double crochet 2 together. So work away on this round, and then that's it. If you want to carry on lengthening your sweater, then you repeat that round for as many times as you would like until it's the length that you would like it to be, bearing in mind that some of my versions, as you'll see in the pictures, have got ribs and bottom bands on them, and that's what they're calculated to have. So if you're going to add a bottom band, make sure you stop short of where you're going to then add it. But if you are ready after this round, as I'm going to be, I think, to flatten your bottom and then put your bottom band on, then meet me back here and I'll show you how we do that. It's very similar, but one small tweak to the beginning of your row, as it will now become. Once you've got your sweater to the length that you would like it, either by following the pattern or by just trying it on and seeing if you're happy with where it sits on you, we are ready now to start flattening the bottom. Now, believe it or not, I've got it this way up, so this is going to become the bottom, and we need to now work so it's a straight line here and then also decreases and meets. So we're going to basically make a big triangle in this space that we have here, and we're going to do that side by side. So we're going to work this side of the sweater and then turn turn back and work in rows. So that will all close in one piece, and then we will rejoin our yarn, and then we will close this side of the sweater as well. So rather than working rounds now, we're going to be working in turned rows. So we begin here then, and it's a really small tweak that means that the rest of the row is exactly the same as we've already been working. This decrease section is exactly the same, but it's just the beginnings that we have differently now. And the only change is that we are in this chain 2 space going to be working a stacked double crochet. If you can hear some scratching, it's my dog itching itself. So we have a stacked double crochet there, and whereas normally we'd be working an increase here, wouldn't we, and working clusters, that's it. That's all we're going to work in that space, because then that will then make us a straight line at the bottom of the sweater. And then no chain 1 here, because we don't need any increases or to work in there afterwards. And then straight into this chain 1 space here, we are going to work, let me move that out of your way, 1, 2, that didn't work, did it? 3 double crochet, and then we chain 1, and then we carry on along here up until we get, as we've said before, to the chain 1 space before, sorry, this chain 1 space, the chain 1 space before the last chain 1, because then we have our double crochet that we're actually going to work a double crochet into without the chain 1 space, and that's what will draw in this center section here underneath the arm. And then you're going to carry on working your granny clusters all the way to here, and then meet me back here when you get to this chain 2 space, and I'll show you what we do to flatten off that side. It's no great surprise, it's very, very similar to what we've just done. So I've got to that last chain 1 space before our chain 2 here at the back or front, whichever one it is, and I have not chained 1. This is the important thing, so don't chain 1 here, and then just put a double crochet into that chain 2 space, and then you are ready to turn, and you're going to repeat that row exactly the same. So straight into this double crochet, we're going to be working a stacked double crochet, and that's going to start flattening off the bottom for you. Then we skip this granny cluster, and then we work into the chain 1 space. So this is all there is to it now. You keep repeating this row until you have, I should have had my example here before with me, until you have 1 double crochet there, 1 in the middle, and 1 at the end, and then 4 granny clusters. So you'll have a double crochet, 2 granny clusters, 1 double crochet in the middle, 2 granny clusters, and a double crochet. So you'll find that it does move in quite quickly, obviously depending on which size you're making, but it does move in quite quickly and decrease. So get to that point, and then I'll show you the last 2 rows are just slightly different, and then that will be that side closed in and complete. So now I have the 1, 2 and 3 double crochets, and then the 1, 2, 3 and 4 granny clusters that I spoke about, and the last 2 rows to close in and completely finish the side here go like this. It's really similar, so we're going to work a stacked double crochet there, and then we're going to go straight into this chain 1 space here and work a granny cluster, and then we're already at the decrease point in the center, so no chain 1, and just go for a double crochet in that center stitch there, and then working into that chain 1 space, we're going to work a granny cluster, and then we're already at the end, so we're skipping this cluster, and then we're going to work a double crochet stitch into the last one. And then we're ready to turn and work this final row of this side, which is even easier, and it is a stacked double crochet in that very first stitch, and then skip this granny cluster, a double crochet in that center one, skip this granny cluster, and then a double crochet in the last stitch. and that closes the side completely for you now. So you can break this yarn. I haven't got my scissors near, but you can break this yarn, and then what we're going to be doing is joining to the other side and working exactly the same. So in order to close the other side, we need to make sure that we join it at the right point, that our stitches are going to be facing the right way. So this is where we need to join. We need to join at the point where the end of that row was. So it's as if that side is going to carry on around. So we have the back of our stitches here, and this is the chain 2 space right at the very front of the sweater. So we'll join our yarn here, and then we will do our stacked double crochet and then work and decrease this side of the sweater in exactly the same way, turning when you get to the chain 2 space here at the other side, at the back of the sweater. So we have our bottom here, and you'll see how it then flattens out the other side in exactly the same way. So go ahead and flatten your second side and close in, and then we'll be ready to pop some sleeves on if you'd like them. Now, if you would like to add sleeves, you'll see in the pattern that there are lots of different options. You have full instructions for how to work a tapered sleeve. You have instructions for how to work like a half sleeve with then a long cuff, which is what I think I'm going to add on this one here. You have instructions for how to decrease, and I will show you how to do that here, but you don't have to do that. You can leave them as straight sleeves, you can put a cuff on the end, you can leave them open, you can add stitches and make them into a bell sleeve. You can do whatever you would like, or you can, I can't remember if I've said this already, you can leave them like this, and there is one version that I'm going to leave like that because I really like this kind of sleeveless look here. Well, it's just kind of a cap sleeve over your shoulder. So however you would like to do your sleeve is fabulous by me, but this is the premise of how we begin them. So I have the right side of my sweater facing me, but I have the wrong side of this last set of stitches here that goes around the armhole, and that's how I need it. I need to have the back of the stitches facing me so I can start working. If they were the opposite way around, which they may be in your size depending on how many rounds we did for the yoke, then you'll need to join with this side of your work facing. And we are going to work in turned rounds for the sleeves, so we will go back and forth and carry on what we've been doing with the sweater. And what we need to do is find the chain 1 space that doesn't have anything connected to it after the armhole. So the direction that you need to be facing, find the chain 1 space after where we split for the arm. And what we're going to be doing is joining in this chain 1 space, and then working our stacked double crochet and 2 double crochet that begins our round. So that's our first granny cluster. We chain 1, and then we work into the next chain 1 space, our next cluster. And we just repeat this all the way around up until you get to that last chain 1 space before it then joins. So work up until there, and then we'll be ready to work under the arm. Now here we are, I've worked into that last chain 1 space, and so what I'm now going to do, I'm going to chain 1 and then I'm going to work into this chain 1 space that has got one attached to it from the body already. So let's go into there and work a granny cluster. And then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work in between this granny cluster and the next, which are angled at different places. So there isn't a chain 1 space in between those, but you can see that there's a space. So we're going to work into there, and then we chain 1, and then we need to work into the space where the double crochet 2 together is. Then we chain 1, then we work into, oh, my dog's dreaming, can you hear him? We need to work in between these 2 here. And now, of course, different sizes will work differently here because you'll have a different amount of clusters to work in on your underarm because there will be a different size. So if you're working a bigger size than I am here, you will have more to add in under here, but a smaller size you will have less. And just check, because it may, depending on, I had to tweak lots of things depending on how many clusters we needed to get in for your armhole. But essentially just do as many as will be then comfortable for you to wear, and will then have the size that you would like to fit comfortably under your arm. And then we have this last one here that's attached to the underarm as well. So for my size that I'm making here, I've now made myself 13 granny clusters, and now I'm going to slip stitch in that first one to join. And now we're going to turn, because we're going to work in turned rounds rather for this. And then we're already in that chain one space, ready to start the next round. Now, the next round and subsequent rounds for all of the sizes will be a regular round, a straight round. So you'll go straight into this first one with a stacked double crochet and 2 double crochet. Sorry, I was trying to think and do at the same time there, and it did not work. There we go, 2 of those. And then you'll carry on the round in exactly the same way. You'll be working a chain 1, skip the next, and then into that next chain 1 space. And now the pattern will tell you, as I said, that it will taper the sleeve for you when you decrease on various rounds. And rather than go through the whole sleeve with you in that way, what I'm going to do is just show you one of those decrease rounds, so then you know how it works for wherever you would like it, because it's very, very similar to what we have here. A decrease round, wherever you choose to do it, begins with a double crochet, stacked double crochet here in the first chain 1 space, and then we double crochet 2 together, so we begin a double crochet in there, and then we begin a double crochet in the next chain 1 space. So we're going to gather these 2 and yarn over and pull through all 3, gather these 2 chain 1 spaces and just make 1 granny cluster in them, as opposed to 2 that we would normally do. And then we chain 1, and then you're off, and you're going to work a granny cluster stitch. It's not a granny cluster stitch, Hannah, a granny cluster as we've called them. So sets of 3 double crochet and then a chain 1 in each of the chain 1 spaces around. And then when you get back to the beginning, just like the other rounds, you slip stitch to join and then you turn. So that's everything you need to know for the sleeve, apart from adding the cuff. So if you work your sleeve for however you would like it, and again, the great thing about this now is you can really try this on and see what fits, see what works for you. You can decrease at any point, you can keep it straight, you can do whatever you like. If you would like to add long cuffs, I would say keep it fairly straight. That's what I'm going to be doing here for mine. And then when you're at the point where you would like to add your cuff, come back to me and we will pop one on together. So I now have my sleeve to the length that I would like it to be. This comes just below my elbow before I'm going to put this long cuff on it. And I'm actually going to go back to the colour that I've used for my squares at the top and that I'm going to use for my neckline to work these cuffs. Now there are options, there are always options, hey? There are options for this. If you're working a long cuff and you're not sure whether you want to do the join as you go method that I'm going to be using here, then you can make these separately and you can attach them. So it's exactly the same way that the mechanism that we're going to be doing here, back and forth in rows, but you just make them as a rectangle and then you can sew them around the edge of your sleeve end here. But I'm going to be working my join as you go method, as I said. And the way that we start that is that you decide where you would like your seam to be, because you are going to have to join it somewhere, and as neat as you can possibly make it, of course, but it's best off to start then underneath where your arm is here, because then it will be much more hidden. So I'm going to work into that center stitch there of those 3 and join this yarn. and then you make them as long or as short as you would like. And similarly, if you're just adding a cuff, a small cuff on the end, the written pattern you'll see will suggest a single crochet row followed by a yarn over slip stitch row in the back loop only. Whereas these longer cuffs, I would recommend that you do a yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only for all of the rows. But again, that's completely up to you. If you want a wider cuff, then go for the first version. If you would like a cuff with lots of lovely stretch but that's a bit tighter to your skin, go for the second option, or change it completely and just go for whatever you would prefer to do. So for me, and for the length that I'm going to do, I'm going to chain out 51 here, and that will be through down to my wrist. So now I've got my long chain here, and I'm going to work back along it from the second chain from the hook and then each across. I'm going to go into the back bumps and I'm going to work a yarn over slip stitch. So we yarn over, we pop into that back bump there, yarn over and pull through everything. Now this first row is the hardest one to do, so don't fight it, don't make it tight, because then the whole thing will end up tight. And my trick for yarn over slip stitches is once you get going, you yarn over, pop through, yarn over, and rather than pull from the front here, rotate to the back and pull it through like that, because you'll have much more space there at the back of the stitch, and it will stop them from getting tighter and tighter as you work the rows. So put one of those in each of the chains as we work along here, and then when we get back to the end of the sleeve or the edge of the sleeve, we are going to slip stitch to join. So now I've worked a stitch in each of those chains along, and I've got back to my sleeve end, and so I'm going to slip stitch in the next stitch on the sleeve edge there, that last round. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn, but I'm actually just going to turn the cuff and then I am going to work a yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only of each. So we've slip stitched there, so we don't need that one, and then we go into the back loop only, yarn over and pull it through. And you will find, as long as you don't pull tight, this creates a really lovely stretchy rib. And so the rest of this rib is just exactly what we've done there, but when we go to this beginning of our next row, we're going to chain one before we begin. We chain one and then we'll yarn over slip stitch into the back loop of each of the stitches along. And then when we get to this sleeve again next time, so the last round of the sleeve, you can decide, basically you can decide whether you want to do it in every stitch, every 2 stitches, or I think what I'm going to do for this one is to go 1 2 1 2 1 2 and keep repeating that sequence around. So essentially, the more stitches that you join it into each time, the tighter it will become. So it might just, you'll see from the pictures how this one sits on me. And it might just be a little trial and error to start with for the first few rows that you do, to see how much it cinches it in and how much you'd like it. Because obviously we're all different shapes and sizes, and our arms through from our elbows through to our wrist, if you're doing these long cuffs, are also very different. So one of the bonuses of doing it separately and not joining it like this is you have much more control over that, because you can just work your rectangle for as big as you need it and then attach it. But the seaming here, it looks much neater and ultimately is much nicer if you can do this join as you go method, but it is entirely up to you. So then once you have finished going around, you then are going to slip stitch your last row to your first row to join the whole thing, and that will be your sleeve complete. The next option I wanted to show you is about the neckline. Now, of course, you can leave it open and plain like this, or you can add a ribbing, as I'm going to do with this one here. So it doesn't really matter where you join it, but as ever, if the least conspicuous place is best, so either I would say at the back or at one of the shoulder points. So I'm going to join here to this shoulder point, and I have the right side facing. And just like with the sleeves, we're going to use a yarn over slip stitch, and you can make it as long as you like, of course, but I'm going to chain 9 to begin mine. And then working back along that chain, we're going to do a yarn over slip stitch in the back bump of the second and each chain along, if I can twist it right. There we go. I'm holding it all awkwardly so that it's in the camera. There we go. And just like with the sleeves, you can slip stitch into as many or as few stitches as you like around the neck for it to gather as you would like it. So again, do a few of these just to see how it's sitting for you, and then you can decide how you'd like to slip stitch as we do this join as you go. So here we are, and then you can decide where you're going to slip stitch, but I'm going to do it in every 2, and then we turn, and then you yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only of each of those. Now at the end of that row, we're going to chain 1, and then off we go again. And then, as I say, join to as many or as few as you'd like along the neckline. And you're just going to work this all the way around, following the curve of the neckline until you get back to the beginning here, and then you're going to join the last row to the first row with a slip stitch seam, and that will be your neckband done. Another option I wanted to show you is how to add a bottom band around this flat edge of the sweater. It's entirely up to you, of course, and I have got the version to show you that hasn't got the bottom band on it because I really like it like that too. But if you want to add one, then it's really nice and straightforward. It works really similarly to the sleeve cuffs and the neckband in the way that we do the join as you go at the bottom here. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the very side, so this double crochet stitch that we have at the very side of it. And I'm not completely convinced I'm going to leave this in the solid pink colour, but I thought it might be nice and easy then to show you where I'm joining everything. I'm going to join to that stitch, and then I'm going to chain 13. Well, that's my suggestion. You can do it as long or as short as you would like it to be. Once you're happy with the length of your chain, we are going to work in the back bumps of it. So you're going to work in the second chain from the hook and put a single crochet in that, and then in each of the back bumps along this chain. And when we've worked in all of them, we are ready for this very first time to just slip stitch in the next stitch. And then we are going to turn, and we can work our yarn over slip stitches in the back loop only of each of these. So a yarn over slip stitch, we work into this back loop only, yarn over, pull through and pull through everything. Yarn over, pop it through, yarn over and pull through everything. And then at the end of the row, we turn. I'm only doing it like that, not to hit the camera. And then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work a single crochet in the back loop only of each of these stitches. Then once we're at the end, we're ready to slip stitch in 2 in our bottom of the sweater. So there's 1, and then there's 2, and then we're going to turn, and then we're going to work a yarn over slip stitch in the back loop of each of those. So make sure you don't work into those slip stitches that you've just added, just into the stitches of the actual row. And then that's pretty much all there is to it. We repeat those rows, and when you join to the bottom of the sweater along here, you can work it however you would like it. So I slip stitch into 2, so for each of these double crochet stitches, I put 2 slip stitches in. But if you wanted yours to be slightly tighter, then you could slip stitch into more. But if you wanted it to be looser, you could, I wouldn't slip stitch into just 1 each time, because then that would flare out. But you could slip stitch into 1 and then do 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, something along those lines. And the great thing about this is it's pretty much done. You can try it on and you can work out where it sits on you, how it sits on you, and depending on what length you've made, if you've made it more cropped, then you might want to cinch in this band and pull it into your waist. But if you've made it slightly longer, if you're anything like me, my hips are bigger, significantly bigger than my waist, so actually I would need it to keep to the dimensions of the sweater. So work your way around, adjusting it to fit you as you would like it. And then when you get back to here and you're joining, you're going to slip stitch the last row to the first row, just like we've done on the sleeves, cuffs and the neckband. I really hope you've enjoyed making this granny square sweater with me. Do come and find me and do show me, and I will see you again soon.